Darling, we're all mad here.
Dude, this is an assignment about Hamlet.
What? Well, that seems more fitting, doesn't it?
Okay, folks, pants. Let me ask you a question. What do we know about him? What adjectives or nouns come to mind?
Emo.
Crazy.
We also have procrastinator and soliloquy. Emphasis on emo, though. While it is true that Hamlet is notoriously an emo guy, boiling him down to a relatable but moody teenager really diminishes a lot of his significance and three-dimensionality. We know the author of Hamlet, okay? We love the author of Hamlet. Can I get my drum roll, please? It's Shakespeare P! Can I get my air horns? All know who Shakespeare is. He wrote all of this very thick anthology. Thank you, Dad, for letting me borrow this without permission. He wrote a number of things. A lot of histories, a lot of comedies, a lot of tragedies. And Hamlet is, in fact, a tragedy. First of all, it's worth noting Hamlet was brought about by grief. It's a tragedy. What do we know about tragedies? English majors?
Everyone dies, they're very sad.
Lots of poetic foibles and such.
Yes. The hero is either defeated or everyone dies. When you ask most people, hey, what happens in Hamlet? They say, yeah, everyone dies. The question is, why? Why is it like this? Yes, they are condemned by the traditional narrative, and we will dive into that because I think Hamlet knows that he's in a tragedy. He's a very intelligent individual, but this tragedy was brought about by real life tragedy, and that is Shakespeare's son, Hamnet. Gee, I wonder where that similarity comes from. This play was written real shortly after William Shakespeare's 11-year-old son died. So he's got some unresolved grief issues going around. And you know, what other way to cope with your grief than to write the opposite scenario from the perspective of your child because you wish that's who lived. Yeah, that's really meta and really, really sad. Also worth noting that William Shakespeare's dad also died around this time. It was a grief-stricken time. Grief. This play has the grief of a lot of things. First of all, it is literally starting in the shadow of death. It starts off with Horatio describing this very bloody battle, and also the old just died. So not only is Prince Hamlet mourning the death of his father, he is mourning a future. He is mourning a life that he never got to see realized because he has been groomed as an heir to the throne. Hey, now your uncle's king. And it is said throughout the play that Hamlet, would he have lived, would have made a great king, but we don't get to know that. And he's grieving the loss of a happy life with his parents. We know he definitely had ideals about how his life would go. The way that other people cope with grief inside of the story is also relevant because Hamlet condemns his mom and his uncle for not grieving his father properly. Meanwhile, they are shunning him for grieving too much, which is a crazy thing to say to your child. Granted, he's 30 years old, but that's still a crazy thing to say to your child. Now, it just so happens to be that Shakespeare divides his work into 5 acts, and there are very commonly 5 points of a plot that we put into the structure of a story. You should not be assigning Shakespeare's acts to this plot mountain because Act 2 has 2 really long scenes and Act 4 has 7 really long scenes, which is why you have to look at each act individually. Act 1, yes, this is the exposition act. The very first significant character you meet is Horatio, Hamlet's trusted friend, confidant, only person who survives. Horatio sees the ghost of Hamlet's dad. Horatio is a scholar, he's a servant, he is not noble, and it is said time and time again that he is a smart dude. He went to college, he has a very scientific viewpoint of the world. And then he sees a ghost, which entirely challenges this man's entire belief system. And what is the first thing he does? I gotta go tell my best friend. We can save the existential crisis for later. That is how we know where Horatio's loyalties lie. And then there's Ophelia, who tells her father, Polonius, and her brother, Laertes,
I think he likes me. Likes you? Please, Rapunzel, that's demented.
that she thinks Hamlet is in love with her. And they go, girl, he is not. Stay away from him. When Horatio tells Hamlet about his father's ghost, he's like, oh my god, take me to that ghost. And Horatio expresses reservations about the fact that it might drive his best friend insane. His best friend doesn't care. And this ghost tells Hamlet, I was murdered in cold blood by your uncle. But Hamlet realizes Horatio might be right. This ghost might be vengeful, it might be evil, it might not be telling the truth. And that is why people associate Hamlet with being a procrastinator, because he doesn't kill Claudius when he has the chance. But he is waiting to collect all of his information because Hamlet knows that he is in a tragedy and he knows what happens when you act rashly. That is what happens in Romeo and Juliet. But Romeo and Juliet and Hamlet, completely separate stories. They have parallels, but they are completely separate stories. Now, what actually happens in Act 2 with only two things are as thus. Number one, Ophelia's back. Hey, Ophelia. Ophelia tells her dad, dude, Hamlet went insane. Because remember how Polonius and Laertes told Ophelia to stay away from Hamlet? Allegedly, Hamlet is not happy about that. Now, remember, Hamlet is kind of on a mission to gather some information. So if people think that he's in his right mind, they won't tell him anything. He needs to be sowing the seeds right now. And it's worth noting that, and we will dig into this, Hamlet does not express any interest or thought towards Ophelia when she's not in the room. And then in the second scene of Act 2, Hamlet's parents, his uncle, Claudius, calls his old college friends Rosencrantz and Guildenstern over. They're stupid. He tells Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, please figure out what is happening with my nephew. They go, okay. They waltz over to Hamlet. What up, bro? And Hamlet goes, you guys are so obvious. You are obviously not here just to see me. I think my uncle hired you. To avoid this very awkward situation, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern tell Hamlet, hey, some actors are coming! And we find out later in Act 3, Hamlet really, really likes theater. He has a lot of very posh opinions about theater, and he knows that if he implores this acting troupe that they gotta do good, they're gonna do good. So Hamlet devises a plan. He is going to make these actors reenact the alleged murder that his uncle put on. And he tells Horatio, hey, if my uncle looks like a guilty man in front of his crime, he's probably guilty. And yet, this is the last time that Hamlet and Ophelia ever interact, and Hamlet's being very hot and cold. During a play, he is like flirting mercilessly with this woman, using her as a sex device. Hamlet is not sane, but this does please Claudius and Polonius, and that kind of solves some of their issues. The thing is that Claudius does react in guilt to the play, and Horatio and Hamlet are like, cool, Hamlet finally thinks he knows what's going on. And so when Gertrude, his mother, says, hey dude, we need to talk, Hamlet's like, bring it! And he tells himself, I'm gonna get so mad at my mom, but I'm not gonna kill her. He does end up killing somebody, and he thinks it's Claudius. It is not Claudius. It's Polonius, Ophelia's father, and Laertes' father, that comes back later, falls out of the curtain, because turns out Claudius told Polonius, you have to listen to their conversation, because my wife is a doormat and she is not going to chew out my nephew the way that she should. And this is where the beginning of the end happens for Hamlet's life, because he didn't have all of the information. In fact, earlier in Act 3, he had the opportunity to kill Claudius, and he didn't because he was praying and he wants Claudius to go to hell. And as soon as Hamlet leaves the room, Claudius says, well, everyone knows that prayer was fake. Hamlet didn't hear that. He has lost a vital piece of information. Now on to Act 4. The first half of Act 4 is a wild goose chase trying to find Polonius' body. And Hamlet seems very aloof as to what he has done. He doesn't even really seem to know where the body is. And it's at this point where we start doubting if he is actually going insane because he just murdered a guy, or if this is still all part of the ruse. And Claudius is like, if I die and this man becomes king, all of Denmark is doomed. So he ships Hamlet off to England. And that's the last we hear about that for a while. Meanwhile, Ophelia has also gone insane. She is not making any sense. It is presumed that she is been driven to grief by the death of her father. But if you think about all the things that have happened before then to Ophelia, it kind of makes sense that that is the only time when anyone has ever listened to her, because no one has ever considered what she actually wanted. Okay? And then Horatio comes in. Hamlet has sent him a letter that he got kidnapped by pirates. This is not a major plot point, but it does happen. And Hamlet says, yeah, so it turns out the king wanted me to die when I got to England, so I told them to kill Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and I'm coming home soon. And that's a lot of information for poor Horatio to deal with. Then Ophelia dies. Laertes comes around, and he is very upset because this Hamlet guy, he wanted to stay away from Ophelia. He did not stay away from Ophelia. Now his dad is dead. Laertes is pissed. And so, going into Act 5, Laertes and Claudius, now both having heavy gripes with Hamlet, have a plan. We're just going to kill him ourselves. And that is how we start out Act 5. And Act 5 has a lot more of that same mortality talk. Most of Act 5's first scene is inside a graveyard, and Horatio and Hamlet are just watching these gravediggers be completely aloof to what they're doing, because that's just their job. Hamlet is very saddened by this. He sees the skull. Alas, poor Yorick! I knew him, Horatio! Because this is a man who he loved, was potentially like a father figure to him. And now he's just in the ground. And then, more death talk, Hamlet sees Ophelia's funeral. And Laertes and Hamlet get into a fist fight over who loved Ophelia more. And once again, on Hamlet's part, this seems entirely performative. He has never expressed actual interest in Ophelia until now. We can assume that they grew up together, but again, this is performative. It's possible that Hamlet could have loved her like a brother, and he does in fact say, not the times of 40,000 brothers could amount my love for her. That doesn't have to be interpreted romantically because of the fact that even if Hamlet is truly insane by now, this is not coming from an honest place. And so now Hamlet all over the place. Everyone all over the place. At this point, no one is entirely sane anymore. And when Horatio tells Hamlet, I think this duel that Laertes and Claudius have set up, I think this is weird. Maybe you shouldn't go. Hamlet doesn't care anymore. He doesn't even say, I hate my life, so let me go die. He is completely ambivalent. He does not care. He says, if this is my time, this is my time. And he does die. And it is his final act as a living person is telling Horatio to live. The entire time, he either craves death or he just doesn't care if it happens. To be or not to be. He is chosen for Horatio because Horatio tries to kill himself. And through this entire play, it is made very clear that killing yourself is a sin. Horatio would rather go to hell than live without Hamlet. And even as Hamlet dies, Horatio says, may angels sing thee to thy rest, which means that Horatio believes that Hamlet is going to heaven. He would rather be alone in hell than without Hamlet. And Hamlet assures him, no, you need to stay alive. That is what we are meant for. The purpose of life is to live and tell the tales of others before us. That is what happens with King Hamlet. That is what just happened with Yorick this whole time. And that is our plot summary. Conflicts in this. There's natural conflicts. Hamlet is very annoyed with the fact that death is a thing because it has both come for those he loves way too soon and has not come for him soon enough. And Claudius uses this against him. He goes, hey, everyone dies. Why do you care? And that is still a crazy thing to say. And then there is, again, Hamlet versus Claudius, because Claudius killed his father, and I feel like that would make most people pretty upset, as it makes Hamlet. There's Hamlet versus Laertes. Hamlet does not appear to hold ill will against Laertes, but Laertes holds so much against Hamlet. And this is notable because Hamlet, otherwise, very emotional guy. We called him emo at the beginning. Emo does not just mean sad. We have seen Hamlet be very rash in the past, and that is how Laertes acts towards him. But Hamlet does not match this in the slightest. And then you have Ophelia's conflict. She is being used by everybody around her and she has no autonomy for herself. There's Horatio's conflict, having to watch the person he trusts most in the world slowly succumb to madness, and Horatio does everything he can to stop it, and he just can't. There's a lot of depth in this story, even though it focuses primarily on Hamlet. There's even Gertrude's conflict. She is an exceedingly minor character, but she is not even just black or white. She is torn between the love she has for her son and the stability of her nation. It's the same thing with Claudius. Claudius is kind of evil. He murdered his brother and we don't know why. It might have been for power, it might have been for that sweet, sweet queen. We do not know. Thanks, Dad. However, what we do know is that he's kind to Hamlet. His only resent towards Hamlet comes from Hamlet's threat to him as a political figure. He is still fatherly towards Hamlet, especially in the beginning. It is not until everyone goes insane that we start seeing a bigger and bigger rift between them. Now, a literary analysis, and I will be focusing on Hamlet and Horatio's relationship because they are so special to me. So, the textual evidence I have for Act 1 is the fact that they are very open with their adoration for each other. First of all, one of the very first things that Horatio says about Hamlet is needful in our loves. He loves Hamlet. Love has a different meaning back then. We know this, but it's still worth pointing out, especially because when Horatio addresses Hamlet as my lord for the first time, Hamlet tells him, don't call me that. I'm your friend. We're equals. I don't care that we are not equal in status. We are equals in soul, and I want you to address me as such. Now this M dash. I don't see anyone talking about this M dash, but it is very common in plays of Hamlet for people to play this as Horatio? Or do I forget myself? No one ever acts as though this is Hamlet forgetting Horatio, despite that being the words. And that is because this M dash, he is starting. He is seeing his best friend at his castle, and he didn't think he was going to see his best friend here. He is in disbelief. It's not actually that he has forgotten anything. Hamlet is faced with a lot of other people trying to tell him a lot of different things. And Hamlet's repeated focus is on, Horatio, why are you here? I didn't think you'd be here. What's up? Why are you here? He's very excited. And again, I know this is a 30-year-old man, but 30-year-old men can also have best friends. Here's what I was mentioning earlier. Horatio truly believes that seeing Hamlet's father's ghost might be the beginning of undoing, and Hamlet echoes this in Act 2. Horatio is not in Act 2. That's the only textual evidence I have for Act 2. So we get to Act 3, the famous get thee to a nunnery spiel. And people can spin this a lot of different ways. There are people who say Ophelia is in on it, and so she and Hamlet are acting up. We have Hamlet being angry. He knows that he's being watched, and so he is very upset that Ophelia is being used, or he's upset in Ophelia's compliance. Either way, I really don't think that he is calling Ophelia someone who sleeps around, because we know this is not true. The entire time, Ophelia is used as a device for only Hamlet romantically. He is not telling her to get to a nunnery because he's upset. He knows he's in a tragedy. He knows something is going down, and he probably, from a brotherly perspective, because again, he does not show otherwise interest in Ophelia, he is trying to protect her. He knows things are happening. He does not want to see this very innocent girl come to harm's way. At least that was his means behind the word. Obviously, to the onlookers, Claudius and Polonius, they think, wow, he's mean. Now again, we have Horatio. I just want to emphasize sweet. We have Horatio called Sweet Prince, Sweet Lord a number of times. It's just worth mentioning that Sweet had a lot of homoerotic undertones at the time that this was written. Just saying. Everyone go read Shakespeare's Sonnet 20. And then we have a whole soliloquy about how much Hamlet loves Horatio. And I could not make that up if I tried. Hamlet starts going on about how much he values Horatio, even though Horatio, lower in status, noble of heart, true in soul, does not listen to passion or whims, is completely and entirely logical. This is where we get the phrase, in my heart of hearts. Give me that man that is not passion's slave, and I will wear him in my heart's core. I, in my heart of hearts, as I do thee. How do you respond to that? You don't. Hamlet realized he said way too much, really quickly. Because while I said, yeah, they're open their adoration for each other, a whole soliloquy about it is quite a lot. And that's where these M dashes come back in. Hamlet is started. He's realized, oh, I said a lot. And then he goes, something too much of this. And he starts relaying his plan to Horatio. Now, let it be known, Hamlet tells Horatio all of his plans from the very beginning, but he only has Horatio swear to secrecy one time. And that is when another person, Marcellus the guard, is present. It's just out of circumstance at that point. You just have to make them swear because you have to make everyone swear if you're making one person swear. Never again. He trusts Horatio so much. And I just really want to emphasize that. This is the only constant in the entire whack universe that Hamlet is living in right now. And again, Hamlet says, we will both our judgment join in censure of his stealing. This is referring to Claudius's guilt or no guilt. They are both deciding. Even though Hamlet is the Prince of Denmark, he can in essence do whatever he wants. And he does. He kills multiple people and he doesn't get that much punishment for most of the play. And yet he says, we will both be deciding this because he knows he can be unreasonable and he is relying upon Horatio. And that's important. And then in Act 4, remember when I said that Hamlet writes to Horatio? The tones in these letters are very important to me. First of all, Horatio says no one in the world would write to me except for Hamlet. Because we're not saying this is Horatio's only friend, but definitely his closest friend. And if you're in a lower status, there's not a lot of people who are going to want to take the time to write letters to you anyway. Especially because this is the 1600s. For all we know, Horatio's family is dead. Who else is writing to him? Hamlet. Even though Hamlet's MIA, I know this has to be from Hamlet. And in the entire letter, Hamlet is very, very open and honest with what he can be. He does say, there are things I can't tell you. I have to tell you this in person. But it is a promise. I will tell you these. And he ends it with, he that thou knowest thine, Hamlet. That is very special, especially given that in Hamlet's letter to Claudius, he just signs off Hamlet. And he is so much more curt, so much more rude to Claudius in his letter. That is so intentional. Remember how he was really direct with Horatio? He's not direct with Claudius. Claudius hands this letter to Laertes, asking him to try to find what any of this means. Laertes has no idea. It's not just a Claudius thing. It is the fact that Hamlet is talking in circles around them, keeping up the madness while he's not even there. And yet with Horatio is the only person who is allowed to know that Hamlet is really okay. Act 5. And this is where I'm drawing attention to the fact that none of Horatio's lines are terribly long. We've established that Horatio is a very level-headed person. But he is smart. If you allow him to talk, he might, but that's not what the nature of his and Hamlet's relationship is. Hamlet is a yapper, and Horatio knows that sometimes a yapper's gotta yap, to use more colloquial terms. So Horatio just lets Hamlet talk things out. Horatio is not necessarily a yes man for Hamlet. Horatio does mildly condemn Hamlet, both saying that he wishes that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern hadn't been murdered for no reason. And also, he says, in an aside, what a king is this? This is so vague. This could be in reference to the ghost of King Hamlet. This could be in reference to Claudius's behavior towards Prince Hamlet. It could be about the prospect of Prince Hamlet becoming king and already carelessly sending people to their death. Horatio is not inherently a yes man, but he knows that Hamlet needs his support. This man would have gone off the walls bonkers if Horatio hadn't been there to steady him. He's already going off the walls bonkers. Horatio knows this is not the time or the place. This is, again, Hamlet is very performative in his love for Ophelia. I loved Ophelia. 40,000 brothers could not with all their quantity of love make up my sum. What wilt thou do for her? He has not talked about Ophelia since the beginning of Act 3. We're in Act 5 now. Where is this coming from? You don't know that Ophelia's dead until right now at her funeral. You didn't write a letter to Ophelia. You wrote a letter to Horatio. That is where Hamlet's loyalties lie. Hamlet's loyalties lie to Horatio and to his family, and subsequently the crown. He does not consider Claudius family anymore, as is said in Act 1, Scene 2, quote, a little more than kin, a little less than kind, because Claudius has just married his mom, technically making this man his father, but Hamlet holds a lot of resentment. That man, not his family anymore. Oh, this is so important! So, Hamlet's final soliloquy is telling Horatio, if you ever loved me, if thou didst ever hold me in my heart. Remember how Hamlet said that in Act 3, I hold you in my heart of hearts? He is telling Horatio, if you ever loved me the way I loved you, please stay alive. And I have already gone on my little tangent about this significance, but you know what is also important? I don't have Horatio's whole soliloquy on here. I wouldn't fit that onto the page. But Horatio's first act, he is normally calm, level-headed, steady. He attempts suicide, and then his heart broken in a very long-winded fashion, he tells the oncoming conquerors. I didn't really dive into that subplot. It's not really relevant to the layers of the story, but that's a thing that happens. He tells them Hamlet's story, which, if we're familiar with Hamilton, very Eliza, and we know that Hamilton and Eliza were also in love, but good night, sweet prince, again with the homoerotic undertones, and also flights of angels sing thee to thy rest. Why is this important? Because the entire time Horatio has never used informal vocabulary for Hamlet, and now that he's dead, he finally does. Hamlet never got to see that realization of them finally being on equal footing. And that is heart-wrenching, but very important. Hamlet is a metaphor for grief. This is the part where I have to use literary terms and apply them. So I'm going to kind of spitfire these out because I feel like in my previous ramblings, I have been very, very clear. Hamlet is a metaphor for grief. He was born out of William Shakespeare's grief, and he was born into a very grief-stricken world. I have already talked about everything that he is grieving. But do we know why Hamlet goes insane? Do we know why Hamlet acts rash? Because that's what grief does to anybody. He's not just being turned by grief. He is the embodiment of grief. Sometimes people will talk about it's really hard to be the friend of someone who is grieving. We see that. Grief is so utterly powerful in the chokehold that it takes in your mindscape. It makes you do things and say things and think things that you would not have otherwise. And that is, again, it's very important. Hamlet is very important. Now, Laertes is a foil to Hamlet. I have not really talked about Laertes. He's a pretty minor character, but he is the person who kills Hamlet with a poisoned sword. Hamlet also kills Laertes, but Hamlet and Laertes both have intense loyalties to their fathers. They are both extremely rash individuals. They both have allegedly some sort of care towards Ophelia. I'm not saying that Laertes didn't love Ophelia, but Laertes was really mean to her. And I know that's just how you treated women back in the day, but that's still kind of questionable. So they both allegedly loved Ophelia, and both of their fathers die at the hands of someone who should not have killed them. Both of their fathers die by someone who is in the royal family. They are foils to each other. But the difference is that their intensities are reversed, which I have already talked about. Laertes is entirely fixated on Hamlet, but that Hamlet is entirely fixated on Claudius. And I think that's really interesting. Up next, Horatio and Hamlet are not supposed to be opposites, but they do juxtapose each other. Horatio is not a perfect individual. Do you know why Ophelia is allowed to spew her nonsense? Because Horatio says, she's going to keep talking to everyone if we don't give her the light of day. We just need to get her to shut up now. That's not a very nice thing to do. Horatio and Hamlet share similar points of view. They are not opposites to each other. They both go to the same school. They share the same interests. They view things in similar ways. They can still disagree on things, but it's not about their dissimilarity. It is not about their opposition that makes them close. It's the fact that they balance each other. And you can see that every time they interact in their juxtaposition. Hamlet, incredibly wordy. Horatio goes, "Aye, my lord." And that is it. That's not because Horatio is insignificant. It is because Horatio is a stabling block. Just like how Horatio without Hamlet, it's not that Horatio is nobody, but Hamlet brings out a fire in Horatio, because we see Horatio just goes, "Nah, man, ghosts aren't real. I know ghosts aren't real." What is the first thing that Horatio does when he experiences something that contradicts his belief systems? He goes to Hamlet. Hamlet might not help him make sense of it, but Hamlet will help him talk it out. Okay? Now, okay. I don't know why it keeps doing this, but so Polonius's death. We haven't really talked about Polonius all that much. He is stupid. They talk a lot about how much Polonius talks. When you're reading or seeing the play, you notice, wow, Polonius talks a lot. And in fact, he remarks that he once played Caesar in the play Julius Caesar, also written by Shakespeare. But that's a little too meta for this. But Polonius goes in the most dramatic reenactment of this death of all time. Not only is this foreshadowing Polonius's death, but when Polonius finally dies, you know what he does? "Oh, I've been killed. Alas, I am slain." That's it. That's it? For the yapper, that's it? That is a very notable shift in the story. That is very important. It's also ironic to the audience, because if you know this story is a tragedy, you know with one death comes so many others. And we can argue that yes, this started with the murder of King Hamlet. Maybe this even started with the murder of King Fortinbras. But the thing is, this is the first murder we see on stage, and everything accelerates right after that. Ophelia. I have already talked in extent about Ophelia. She is significant in the story, less so as a storytelling device, but more as what the effects of treating someone poorly does to them. Everyone has secrets here. Ophelia is the only person who's open about anything. She could have chosen not to tell her dad. In fact, it is really common for Shakespeare to write women who don't follow the rules. That's what makes them powerful. That's what makes them interesting. Ophelia doesn't do that. And it is for her kindness and honesty that gets taken advantage of and quite literally tossed to the side into a river. She drowned herself. And Gertrude uses a lot of flowery language to describe Ophelia's death. That is just word of mouth. We don't know if Ophelia's death was calm at all. Her life seemed calm from an outside perspective, but do you notice how confused she becomes until her death? She goes, "I think he likes me. I don't think he likes me, so I'm not gonna talk to him." And then he bursts into her room shirtless. Then he chews her out. Then he starts making sex jokes at her. Then he kills her dad. Her brother told him, "Don't talk to that guy," once, goes off to France. Ophelia's only ever used as a means to someone else's end. Polonius proving a point about his honor, okay? Hamlet proving a point about his sanity. Laertes proving a point about his superiority. It is never about Ophelia. She goes along with it not because she is weak, but because she is good. And she is possibly the only good character in this story. So now I have my themes. Like I said, Ophelia is the only one without secrets. Secrets are for the dead. They drive the living mad. It is with King Hamlet's secret that Claudius killed him that starts everything. Claudius, you can see, is slowly, he's not going off his rocker per se, but he knows that he has put himself in a very tense political situation, and that's gonna take a toll. Hamlet is keeping secrets from everyone around him except for Horatio. Horatio is keeping Hamlet's secrets for him. Gertrude, we don't know if she has secrets, but she's not telling everything because Gertrude is constantly trying to play both sides. I love you, Hamlet. I hate you, Hamlet. I love you, Hamlet. You gotta cheer up. Hamlet, I love you. Please be okay. You are being the worst son ever. She is playing to both sides. We don't know what anything she says is true because they're all lies. And lies of omission are secrets. Secrets are lies of omission. Gertrude is never once just herself. She is just skirting the line between what she thinks will benefit her the most. And it's not from a power standpoint, it's because she is trying too hard to save everyone or save everything, and it does not work in her favor. Next up, why live? This sounds very bleak and simple for a theme, but it's true. The topic of mortality is touched on over and over and over again. Hamlet contemplates death. Why are we alive? What is the point? Hamlet sees death all around him. Again, very Hamilton the musical. When Aaron Burr asks, why is everyone else I love died, but I'm still here? What is the point of this? That is the same thing that Hamlet is asking right now. What is the meaning of this? I don't have any purpose. I don't have any drive. I'm here to maybe avenge my father if the spirit wasn't lying. I ain't got nothing. And he says this to Horatio, and Horatio can't solve his friend's mental health problems for him. So now they're just there. It is not until at his death's door that Hamlet realizes the reason for living. Everyone's wrongdoing drives them mad in a unique way. When it all closes, nobody is sane any longer. Again, secrets are for the dead. You keep your wrongdoings to yourself, it drives you to an end, okay? Laertes, he doesn't go mad per se, but he is way too angry to be acting like a rational person. Claudius, way too stressed to be acting like a rational person. Hamlet, we already know about this. Okay? Ophelia, gone mad from grief. Gertrude, not making any sense anymore because she doesn't even know what side she's on. The only person who's remotely sane anymore is Horatio. And then, in Horatio's last act of the play, he goes off the deep end. He tries to kill himself. That is when everybody goes mad. We don't get to see Horatio after Hamlet dies. But I really and truly suspect that the cycle of tragedy keeps continuing. I think that Horatio's life becomes sort of meaningless and dull because he is without his Hamlet. Never was there a tale of more woe than that of Hamlet and his Horatio. That's one of my favorite things to say. Thanks, Dad! He's laughing. But I think that I think Horatio is too rational of a man to do any drastic measures. He's also too rational to try to salvage what he believes is already lost. I have an idea for a way that you could retell Hamlet in a series to make it clear that it's from Horatio's perspective, and he's retelling it over and over again to the people. He's relaying Hamlet's story, but reliving the grief will drive him mad. That is what I believe. And also, before I change slides again, Horatio definitely feels guilt about inducing all of this. He's the reason why Hamlet saw his father's ghost at all. Horatio knew it would make everything go wrong. And he probably feels guilt over letting Hamlet go. That is probably why he is so careful in attending with Hamlet. Okay, I have to look over 2 critiques. So first off, we're doing everyone's favorite wannabe mom kisser, Sigmund Freud. He uses Hamlet as an example for his Oedipus complex. He says the reason Hamlet doesn't like King Claudius is because he was gonna kill his dad and marry his mom. Thanks, Mr. Freud. What else do you have for us? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because actually there is a little bit of interest here in the fact that not so much as a Freudian slip, but Freud asserted that, hello mother, welcome back. Freud asserted that Hamlet's procrastination behavior is not because of the fact that he is just lazy or because of the fact that he's seeking information. It's just because of the fact that Hamlet doesn't want to kill somebody. Why else do you put that off for so long? Which is true. Hamlet might not be a good person, but he's not an evil person. It's a reflection of who Hamlet's soul is. It's a reflection of his desire. He didn't ever want to have to kill Claudius. He wanted to live life with his dad. He wanted to live life normally, and that got robbed of him. And now when you're trying to navigate that landscape, the ghost of who you were, not the ghost of King Hamlet, but the ghost of the old Hamlet is probably still in his conscience somewhere. Now that we have that out of the way, I think Paul Cantor's critique of Hamlet is so much more interesting. He tackles it from a religious perspective. What do we know about religion in 16th century England, everybody?
Reformation.
King Henry VIII split the church. Now there's two of them. Then there's the Protestant Reformation. Everyone knows religion is just kind of all over the place. If you're Catholic, get out of here! Okay? But there are Catholic ideals within Hamlet, the same way that there are ideals of everything in Hamlet, because Hamlet is not the hero of his story. He is just the protagonist. But Hamlet still feels a heroic pull, the same way that Achilles felt his heroic pull. And Hamlet achieves it through violent means, but like Freud said, he doesn't want to. He does not want to have to hurt people. He does not want to have to be violent. And again, the idea that killing oneself is sin, the idea that Hamlet's father is trapped in purgatory before he goes to hell, the idea that King Claudius was not murdered because if he was praying, he would have gone to heaven. There is religion soaked deeply inside of this entire play, especially because it is the center of a royal family in a time where divine ruling is very common, very supported. And so we throw these ideas of what is right, what is wrong, what is sinful, what is moral. They're thrown around so much, not to necessarily negate each other, but to contrast each other. There's a difference in attitude. There's a difference even now between Christians who use their worship for hate versus Christians who use that worship for good. There is the aspect of Christianity that has Hamlet wanting to do the right thing, and there is the aspect of Christianity that has Hamlet wanting to go the hero route no matter how absolutely bloody it is. And that's kind of that conflict, and that's why Hamlet stays still. And I believe that is the end. Yes, it is. Thank you so much for coming to my TED Talk, everybody. Do we have any questions? Do we think I missed anything?
Why are you dressed like that?
Why am I dressed like that? I am the Cheshire Cat because, darling, we're all mad here. Anything else? Thank you. Have a great night. That was intentional. Okay.